Fit, yeah.
Now what I want to show you now is, next is, there's a kind of a process here. I imagine most people have heard of NEPA and all that, okay? The National Environmental, now there was two actually a long time ago, Policy Act, Protection Act, but NEPA. What happens is there's, if you go look them up, and you can on the internet, the Council on Environmental Quality, and it's like an executive level branch, okay? CEQ, so just typically say that. CEQ is how you go read it often, instead of the whole thing spelled out. They promulgate NEPA, okay? So like recently, they've done a whole revision of their national planning rule, okay? Now, and that has been ongoing for a long time. It got stopped several times from proceeding forward. 89, 2001, 97, 98, 2010, and they finally got through with this revision. But remember this, when you're dealing with an agency person who's not being very understanding locally with you, okay? And they say, well, our handbook, we have this and we have that. Just remember this, forget their handbook. Okay, congressional law, real law, and CEQ and NEPA trump their handbooks. Their handbooks are guidance for their employees, and that's it. They can't write law at the local ranger office. They can't just change AUMs and change the whole process for the region, nor can your regional officer. All of it has a process, and those processes come about initially, theoretically, in the scoping process. And in scoping, if this was a perfect world, they would, early in the process, that's their own words, come to the local governments, tribal governments, impacted users. So let's say water users, irrigation, alfalfa operations, the county seat, and say, hey, we got this idea to put these fish dams upstream. We need you at the table. Is this meeting a good date to kick this off? Now, this is an ideal world. And typically, though, what actually happens is it makes it clear to publication, the thing you saw in the Federal Register, and you're stuck at the tail end in the comment period. So that's one of the things you need to undermine immediately. Now, don't just write, though, when you write as a county or an individual or a trade organization, don't just write, well, I don't like the sage grouse because it's ugly, or I just don't want it here. There's a thing called substantive commentary, and it's a requirement of NEPA. So you're building your case, okay, in other words. Okay, now first off, part of that case is building that administrative record. So right off the bat, when you find an action published in the Federal Register and you say, hey, this is not good to our livestock and grazing out here, we're going to write this local because we know they got an office up the way. And then they write you back and say, we're not meeting with you, or we don't have time, or we'd love to meet with you, but we're not going to consider your input. We've already written the plan. Keep that. Keep that correspondence, because you're building that administrative record, okay, to reference later on if you ever have to go to appeals. And there's two routes to appeals. Now, when you are actually looking at a plan, like I showed you that listing for the Jaguar, I showed you some translocations, etc. Let me show you a few key things just right down here, and it'll be on the screen in a minute. Because this is just bizarre, but unless I show it to you, you can't get the full weight of it. And I just figured you didn't want to see all my 8,000 files. Okay, my land use and water and jurisdiction, just to give you an idea, just that one folder is 150 gigabyte on here, 32,000 items. So I had to have folders, so I figured you didn't want me rummaging through all of it. Okay, the Apache Sitgreaves Forest is where we live. Every forest in the nation was theoretically mandated 6 years ago, well, in 06. So, you know, we'll be going on 7 years shortly from when they did it, to rewrite their forest plans. Okay, all 176 forests in the nation. Now, almost no forest said at the beginning, hey county, hey livestock, hey cities, hey whoever, let's all get together and see what we need. How have things changed? How have industries changed? What have we hurt in our old plan that we need to rectify, that we've been running under as a forest? So it's a pretty important document because, remember, 2/3 of the water in America comes from forest managed land, USDA managed land. 2/3 of your water. When there's the catastrophic wildfires, like I told you about our record-setting one, our 3rd day of monsoons, we have a monsoon season, started a week out at the end of the fire, when it was contained, I should say. The 3rd day of monsoons, clear down in the San Francisco River in the Gila Wilderness, all the trout floated to the top, suffocated to death in another state away in New Mexico, pushing down by the Rio Grande. So you see how big an effect it can have. 5 counties away, clear through 2 wilderness areas, and in another state in 3 days' time from silt runoff. So just because you might be in a grassland and the water's just always flowed downhill because the snowpack, make sure to fully think about when there's a big fire upstream in a neighbor's county, how it might be impacting you, and why that forest plan is important to you as the end receiver of that water for irrigation and for if you're a large city, of course. Pumping stations. The San Carlos Indian Reservation has to pump out of the Black River, and the 2nd day of rains, the carbon off the fire, when you see how it's like reflective, a burned log, and it seems to sparkle like fool's gold, it is abrasive like diamonds. It burned up every pump station in the San Carlos Indian Reservation and White River and Fort Apache, like the movie. There's really a Fort Apache there, and it's a pretty big place. Had no running water within 2 days. It burned up every pump station. No fire hydrants, no drinking water from a fire that wasn't even on their land. So the impact spread really quickly. We had to take this land management plan seriously. You go in, they say, hey, guess what? We've got this new land plan. So we're going to get into the substantive commentary issue of NEPA. We know we've got 45 days to respond. It was kind of a new issue for a lot of new supervisors and staff at our county for this year. It was this spring. They had just been sworn in January. So I said, look, the first thing you need to do is get this extension request on letterhead and send it in. I'm telling you, you will not be able to consume and comment on this plan in 45 days. And they said, why? It's like 450 pages. I said, well, that's the preferred alternative. But there's A through E alternatives. And then those are a synopsis. The agencies hire out to people that have private firms. So I'm a private firm. They never hire my type, though. They hire the people that want to think like them. And what they are allowed to do is take all the specialist reports, they're called, and those would be disciplines. That would be your range officers, your rangeland specialist, Dr. George Rule at ASU. He might do all the grass height and write a specialist report. The social economics, riparian, aquatic, air quality, soil, recreation, transportation. Okay, so you can see how this piles up. Then they hire out to a firm to write a synopsis, and that's what the public gets. The problem is that firm will often write that synopsis based on more of a driven agenda than what was actually said by the scientist. For instance, we found where this roadless network in the Gila Wilderness had to occur in all the surrounding areas around the Gila Wilderness, and every district had to do an 86% reduction in all road networks to help the spotted owl. Yet when we went to the terrestrial, aquatic, and all the habitat specialist reports, they had analyzed the current system that needed the 86% reduction, and all the specialists said the current road networks have no impact on the T&E species or the spotted owl. Yet in the final summary, they make sure to write that if we don't reduce it, we're going to impact the spotted owl. The scientists never said it. So get those extensions right off the bat, because when you start digging, suddenly that for public consumption report that was 75 pages at the front desk is only a portion of 400. It's only a portion of 5 alternatives. And you have to go to the specialist reports to be able to comment with substantive commentary as required by law. Our forest plan was over 3,700 pages. So then the new elected person saw quickly when I gave him a stack, and I went to the supervisor's office and said, well, I want a disc and a printed set, so don't bother me, just give it to me. You know, about the cost of printing. And so that's not my problem. You decided to write it, I want it. Because some people can consume it better if they can highlight, and others like their computer screen. So I'll get both versions, depending on your staff needs or desires. Once the...
Doyel, let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
The Utah forests are going under the new planning rule, not under the 82 rule, which you guys were. So we'll not be facing this anytime soon.
Yeah, sure. You're rhetorical, or you're asking?
I'm making a statement.
Oh.
They're continuing to amend current forest plans, but not revising them.
To the new rule, the new national planning rule.
Yes. So, and it isn't going to come out anytime soon. So.
So they're just going to keep doing amendments to your current forest plan. I would hammer, because the amendments are probably, you probably didn't help at the table write them. And
we've been through two or three different cycles of various rules, but it hasn't come to any point. So they've decided just to wait until the malaise is over.
I don't think that's healthy.
I'd agree.
So, at all. Well, I'm glad that we were able to kind of urge ours to get the dang thing published. Now, keep in mind, though, some things to look for. What we immediately found was when I went to the aquatic and the rangeland and the range management sections. I'm curious, all this water and global climate change, I want to see their bend. Because in the opening statements, they said we have to revise our forest plan to adapt to coming climate change. So they've already accepted it. There's no proof for it. They've just made it a statement, and we're going to rewrite the plan. No, I'm saying they haven't proven it. Now, what you believe in your life, and we might get into that debate there and set it break, but what you believe in your own life, but they have to prove it if they're going to make it a fundamental statement of their plan. We are going to modify what's worked since '82 because of global climate change. That's one of the reasons. Well, they better show the proof, which of course they couldn't. I went to water because of ag, irrigation, etc., recreation, and livestock. Why do we protect water so much? Some of the biggest employers in our state are the power plants and the dams, recreation. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and we are the copper capital of the world. And mines need lots of water to employ those tens of thousands of people. So we have no mines in our county, but we better be able to send them good water to function. So I don't want it encumbered. They used the numbers, the Forest Service did, of this year in April of 13. They used the rainfall and precipitation levels of the highest year on recorded history since 1906 in our forest, which was 1981. They didn't use the current conditions. So when they used the highest levels of precipitation in history since 1906, this amount of water, let's say from this table to here, 30 inches per year, and we're only running on average 11. What that did was that allowed them to set the stubble and the growth heights way beyond reach for any permittee. Because they said, based on this amount of water, you can have this much grass. And if you don't have this much grass, we're not going to let you graze. That's 1981 rainfall. That's not today. Another thing we found is we just went through the record-setting fire, those 800,000+ acres I told you about. And in the timber, the recreation, the transportation, which a ton of it was flooded out with landslides higher than this roof, the ceiling in here, I mean. They admitted that they did not resurvey. They just published it in April of this year. They did not resurvey, and all the numbers for tree density, recreation, flood hazards, and fuel loads are from the record-setting fire in our history. So how scientific is that? To base a report that's going to guide you for 20 or 30 years, and a lot of the impacts to your county, recreation, mining, water, etc., grazing, to base it on numbers that are completely outdated because of catastrophic wildfires, whole road networks washed out, bridges gone. It isn't. Okay? It's not feasible, it's not proper. So those are the things when you're writing a substantive commentary to get into. And then here's something like, is that big enough for everybody? Just let me see. So here's something like what you might end up turning in the end. My comment, because I was dealing with some 3,700 pages, the comment ended up like 82 pages long. And no, this was not fun reading all that and writing all this. But what I do is, for the social economics part, I have 2 PhDs, social economist and range economist. I have an economist in rangeland science, PhD at ASU. I have a riparian habitat, a NEPA specialist, and a technical writer in the firm. That's just like 5 that I used on this plan of 76 people. Okay, because some, if they deal with only defense industry, obviously they could care less about the timber. Okay, so pulling them in is the only way to get one of these done. Now, they gave us an extension, and we had a whopping 90 days to consume 3,700 pages, cross-check it, and write back and have it filed in time. So, of course, we appreciated the time to comment. We have the responsibility for protecting the health and welfare of our citizens, including but not limited to protecting the societal and economic impacts of Forest Service planning. Okay? Despite the fact that 2/3 of our county is sandstone and reservation. It doesn't matter. They're all using water. And they need to have mills. They may not be cutting it, but they're processing it. So, to do a substantive commentary, I always put a table of contents in, and I suggest you do that. Because remember, you're not always dealing with the brightest bulb in the closet. Okay? The people reading this, I'm saying, when you turn it in. So, you should probably do it in order as they wrote it and comment to it. So do a point-counterpoint system. For it to meet the requirements of law, so that they have to consider your comments and integrate them into the revised plan down the road, or to make you have legal standing for an appeal if you want to through the Department of Justice or the Forest Service. You have 2 routes. You always have an agency. I said Forest Service in this case. And you have Department of Justice. And you can actually appeal both routes simultaneously in parallel if you want for a NEPA project. And the sheriffs and the search and rescue team and the posse, I had them help write all the transportation network stuff. Because those are the folks strapped with all the lost hikers, the people that get caught in on flash floods, the people get stuck in behind wilderness areas. It's not the supervisor, and it's not the planning and engineering department or community development, and it's not the rancher. That's the sheriff who has to deal with that. So they participated in the writing of this as well, because they got to do all those search and rescue functions. So we got everybody involved to get their input besides the science side. And then here is for instance, issue, the DEIS fails to provide an unbiased presentation of alternatives, which was true. They held 5 public meetings as if for this giant report that's going to impact everybody for 20 or 30 years. They held only 5 meetings, and at every meeting when you walked in, you did not get to see alternative A, B, C, and D, and E. You got to see alternative B, the preferred alternative of the agency. That was the only booklet that was there. That was the only map present. So they didn't even show the public, who doesn't know what, let's say I might know, what their choices even were. That's typical. So we showed in NEPA 1502.2 requires to achieve the purposes set forth, agencies shall prepare environmental impact statements in the following manner. They shall not commit resources prejudicing selection of alternatives before making a final decision. What that's called in the courts is pre-decisional. They shall not be pre-decisional. Well, when they pimp to the public, here's Plan B, here's our public meeting, they were pre-decisional. So we talked about it and proved it after we quoted the law from our problem, and then we gave them remedy. For instance, bias wording within the DEIS should be changed to present an unprejudiced selection of alternatives. The public should be aware that just because the agency perverts an alternative, that alternative may not be the best one. You go through that plan step by step. So you tell them, you can't do grass heights and stubble and grass measurements on the range surveys You can't base that on the highest rainfall on record for 1981 and ignore the current conditions. And you can't do the fuel load and timber harvesting and recreation based on pre-fire conditions after the record-setting fire burned 856,000 acres. You can't do that. Here's why. It's not the current conditions. Go back and rewrite it. And when you rewrite something that's legal and follows the law, go ahead and republish it and we'll comment again. So several times when we've had to do this, like the southwestern gray wolf, 400 in the last 4 years we've whipped. Like that Three Forks spring snail or Chiricahua leopard frog. That Chiricahua leopard frog, that area, according to the Fish and Game and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Arizona cattle growers, that area impacted was worth $250,000 to our county. And we spent $450 writing the comment to it. So it was a good investment, and that's common. And then when they realize that you've got them in a corner, and you're not just going to stand down and let them bully you around, and you have the law backing you, and you're not being unreasonable, all we're doing is telling them, go ahead and follow the law, and you better prove this point out and integrate it in the next plan, and go ahead and come talk to us again. Once you do that, they'll often just pull the plan. The comment period wasn't even over in February on the wolf, and they pulled the whole plan for 3 states in writing. And then the Federal Register published, due to commentary received from Apache County, we see no need for critical habitat in their county. The county on each side of us who said we were kooky, they got 22,000 acres of loach minnow habitat. We got none. So our cattle growers benefited, and our ag water users benefited for their downstream concho and all that. That's big hay and alfalfa operations. So I know this all sounds bizarre and stupid to most people, and I don't blame you, okay? Because it is bizarre and stupid, most of it. But there's provable science to show that, like our PhD economists, they published a paper through the University of New Mexico to show that as our rural communities in New Mexico and Arizona lost a bunch of our logging and cattle starting in the 80s, okay, with different rules and different management styles and different litigation that came down the pike. As we lost these rural jobs, there was a complete corresponding influence on juvenile delinquency, divorce rates, domestic violence, drug use, alcoholism. It could be directly correlated. Now, the long and short of it is people lose jobs, they got nothing to do all day but sit at home and get mad at the wife and whip on her, or the kids aren't in a good environment and they start acting up. The law enforcement realizes that. Our PhDs proved it though, with all the statistics, and showed it. So you have a valid reason as a county to be engaged, okay? To protect your backyards. And it's, welfare is not just economic welfare. It's in fact, the police powers of the state, where you derive that power from, is defined as health, safety, welfare, and morals. That's the 4 things for the police powers of the state. So this is just a few things that we've done that were successful, and we've had some big pitfalls. One of the pitfalls was on a water project, we brought in too many people by accident. We just didn't know what was going to happen. And on a major watershed all the way through us, the Nutrioso watershed, the San Francisco, everything, the TEP, one of our big power producers, and SRP in our state, and provides throughout the Southwest and clear to California and Nevada power to them from us. We had too many players in it, okay? And what we had done was the Forest Service, in this case the Alpine Ranger District uphill from me, needed a lot of water riparian area fixes. Now this benefits the cattle, the recreation, everybody, and the irrigation ag users. So we wanted to see it done. They're broke. I went and got money from the State Water Board for them, and I got scientists donated to do all the water quality testing in their own labs from the power plants. But what happened is pretty soon everybody in the world showed up wanting to get in on it. The next thing I knew, I had Trout Unlimited and the National Wild Turkey Federation And everybody wanted to get in on this project. And before you knew it, we were having to make people mad because all these elements started eating up under the name of admin money. And our goal is to get that funds on the ground and do the work, not have 20 different heads shuffling paperwork. So that has had to happen 2 or 3 times, not had to happen. We've had to shut it down and kind of rethink the project and start back at square one again. So I'm just giving you a warning from some of our bad experiences. It's amazing how quick people came out of the woodwork and wanted to latch on to something, but of course they needed some admin money to latch on. They never just came with this free offer like it sounded up front. But nothing's free, so we should have known better. I think most people understand many of the problems that have come about to face local control and the attacks and impacts on cultural and historic uses, agency encroachment. Some of this we're going to go through fast because I want to get to some of the citations which are most important for you all. Water grabs by federal agencies, unfunded mandates, wild and scenic designations, wilderness areas that aren't really called wilderness because only Congress can approve those, no travel in quiet areas. And these are going on and on. I did a job in Kansas, and that's all grasslands, but they're still the largest grasslands in the world managed by the Forest Service in Kansas. So it's the same process, same everything, even though you can't find a pine tree out there. Okay, it still was a forest. Okay. Bioregional governance is something referred to by many of the groups, and that's why you see so many of these critters crossing state lines, and that's why so many of these, like BLN, the new land management plan, it's called the Colorado Plateau Land Management Plan. They want to do the 4 corner states as one plan, is their goal for a land management plan, the BLN. They published it in the Federal Register, and then said, if you want updates, you better keep track of our site, our website, because we're not going to publish again. That's how bold some of these agencies are getting. So you start having to track these agencies all over. ESA, NEPA, FLIPMA, all stuff I know you've heard about before. That protection is derived from the 10th Amendment to protect the health, safety, and welfare and morals, is the full thing. And what it's called is police powers of the state, and that's relegated to the state and its political subdivisions. The best bet, honestly, is if people would, I put band together, but you know what I mean. Share resources. When you've got a water issue that crosses county lines, probably don't just tackle it by yourself, unless your neighbor just doesn't want to help and they outright refuse you. But at least go ask. And vice versa, chip in when you see your neighbor is under attack if you know that half your county is working over in that county at that mill or on that operation to begin with. That's a key thing. So what happened was the county started, in Apache County, I'll pick on us, started seeing this tremendous amount of national and regional scale planning coming down that we were never afforded anything at the table. Yes, sir.
Can you go back to the last point on the previous slide?
Yeah.
Give us your take on why it is that you believe that to be true.
Local government's the highest and most authoritative we have in our republic must quit attacking the symptoms and begin attacking the disease, federal encroachment.
Because as a general rule, the general populace doesn't believe that the local government has any powers, and so.
Well, per the discussions like I even entertained this morning when you were setting up with people that I'd never met before. I've got a sheriff who's getting a call from a permittee on an issue with his AUMs. The federal agency's not getting those calls. In fact, that agency, most of them don't even know who that guy is, but you guys all knew him by name. Once you popped in on the conversation, you folks know what your school budgets are going through, what your sheriff's department and deputies are going through on budgets or crime rates. The federal agencies do not. And the federal encroachment issue, I don't care on what front it is, whether it's in education mandates, health care, pick your poison, okay, is what it comes down to anymore. The main solution will be complete divestiture of the land to the states from the federal government. That's going to be the number one solution. But don't be foolish, because that doesn't mean that you're, like we have ADEQ, Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, and of course we have a Game and Fish, and I already told you about having to lock horns with them. And in Garfield, where I had to help them on a couple issues, but in both cases the state agency was party, joint lead with the Fed. So don't think that in December 14 the Fed goes, Utah, you know you're right, and your bill was a good idea, here's all your land. Don't think that it's just going to end, that no one's going to want to encumber your water or try to put a funny species in your backyard. So in this process still will be the same. The locals are the experts. And too often what we do is, we've all been guilty of it. We attack the symptoms and not the disease. So the Forest Service, that ranger's an ass and I can't deal with them and they're against the cattle. And then, so this group is here, and the cattlemen that are with me, and they'll be up here this week with me on some meetings and down at hearings in Albuquerque on Friday, these national hearings we have to be at. They'll admit that we threw everybody under the bus 20 years ago to worry about the cattle, because we were so worried under some big attacks that came in the 80s on the logging industries and water, but all we worried about was cattle. And the timber guys only worried about timber. And the recreationists worried about recreationists. And pretty soon they were all decimated. When they're realizing now that the attacks is that massive federal encroachment across the board. And if they would clan up and protect each other's cultural and historic uses in their backyard, they'd get a lot farther. And you local governing officials are the experts. I mean, you know the numbers. The guys in D.C. that write these plans have no idea what your budgets are like. They don't consider them, they don't care about them, if they even know that your county exists. So the first thing we did in the county was, instead of me being a county employee, Apache County, and I'm going to pick on them heavy since I live there, and my supervisor will be here later, so I'm not being unfair. You can tell them I picked on our county. I have veterans benefits, although they're not very good. I do have them from being stupid and young at one time. So I do have medical, and having Martin Luther King Day off doesn't mean much to me. So I didn't need all those. So what we did was, they contracted with my firm instead of keeping me under the umbrella as a county employee. They saved money, I contracted. I preferred the contracts anyway, because then I get to do one-off jobs like with congressmen, like when I have to do those. It's an issue in an area in their district, and you're done. And that's it, and you walk away. The first thing we had to do, though, was get the staff better, a little better educated, like what's going on today. Okay, here's what goes on typically. Here's a bunch of things in our backyard. I was able to be more focused because I didn't have a room with different counties and positions that I don't know, really. I mean, I heard you all this morning, but I didn't memorize what you all do. Sheriffs are easy to tell who they are, but and the deputy. But so we said, and then before you knew it, we started hearing back amongst each other, sitting in a room like this after a couple hours. The engineering department had been suffering on roads and didn't even know where it had come from. They just knew that they couldn't go do X, Y, Z anymore up in the forest to get to the in holdings. And the human resources and whatnot. So once everybody had the ability to acknowledge what were some of the threats and attacks that had been coming down, and that they had been across multiple departments, it wasn't just engineering, or not just the sheriffs had been absorbing all the angst. We went into and started approaching some of the problems. Now, travel management is a national rule, and the long and short of that is in 2006 it was promulgated after a meeting in San Diego of so-called stakeholders. I doubt any of you were there, helping them develop this plan. Then once it got published, it said the number one cause of degradation in our forest is due to, in our federally managed lands, is due to unmanaged recreation, whatever that means. Well, a big part of what that means is people going out and camping where you want to camp, like we do where we live, to this day. and driving where you need to for big game retrieval or to go get heating fuel wood. So they were sought, and the average is an 86% reduction in road density. Now, the other side of the coin is from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, ASU, Arizona State University, and then our Arizona Game and Fish Department, we have 3 reports showing the multi-billion-dollar industry that our outdoors is to us in agriculture and sightseeing, four-wheeling, hunting, fishing, camping, bird watching, you name it. They went into all these uses, what's called consumptive timber cutting, non-consumptive, taking a picture of a bird. They're probably still buying gas though and getting hotel rooms. So they have it broke down, then all these sub-activities. 76% of the multi-billion-dollar industry in Arizona hinged on the road networks. So are we ready, prepared to cut away 86% of that and throw that away when we're already broke? So what we did was we had to take an aggressive stand against it using that substantive commentary procedure. In our county right now, on our forest, the A-bar-S, we have the part of the Alpine District and all of the Springerville Ranger District. There's 5 districts. Our forest is massive, huge, across 5 counties. In our county, there's no road closures because they know we're going to court if they approach that. The neighboring county, like Coconino County by Flagstaff area, if that helps you, they got hit with close to 90%. And what's crazy is that at our county state association meeting like about 5 years ago, they acted like we were loons that flew in on a broomstick when we were telling them what we were going to do to try to stop these road closures and why they're valuable to the county and the citizens. And then the day it passes and they suddenly find out people can't camp, they can't go, you can't drive out. If you're 80 years old and just shot an elk, a trophy bull, too bad, you better be able to carry it. You're not driving to it, even though you can see it right there. And there's a road here, but you're still not driving to it. And you're not camping anymore out here. And when they started seeing all those impacts to the camping and the gas stations and the motels and all those impacts and the restaurants in Flagstaff, they were screaming overnight. But now they're locked in that corner. They don't have that standing up front. They don't have that administrative record built up. So now they're going to try to appeal as Coconino County, and they've got an uphill battle the whole direction because they never raised a squawk or filed a single letter or anything throughout the whole commentary process. Because they said, well, the Forest Service promised us they won't hurt our economy. I said, did they put it in writing? Well, no, but they told us. Okay, I'm not going to hurt your economy. Are you going to believe me? From some outside agency that rotates leadership every couple years? I mean, come on. So that is one of the benefits of just standing up. What they realized, and as it came right out of Washington, D.C., the Chief Forester's office, it'd be best if we just let this plan die on the vine. Told us to our face when we're sitting in the Chief Forester's office. We, as in the county attorney, the chief, we don't have undersheriff, we have chief deputy, the chairman of the board of supervisors, the county manager, and myself. The largest water grab in Arizona history came about in this period, and there's going to be another wave of that with this West Waters of the U.S. plan that just went to out of the EPA about 3 weeks ago. It's gone to the Office of Management and Budget now for review. And this is kind of like the Clean Water Restoration Act. It's every state in the West will be impacted. It's called like WOOS or something, but it's WOUS, Waters of the U.S. is the title of it. This is horrible. They have in there, like they tried under the Clean Water Restoration Act in 10 and 11, the water running down a bar ditch on the road is navigable, so therefore the Fed has jurisdiction over it. Now, I don't know who's going to run a ferry down the bar ditch, but you don't want to go there with that jurisdiction thing in the water and the federal agencies. So when our round came around, it was the largest amount of claims in Arizona history, and we didn't have a choice but to fight it. It's called a protest system in our state. There's different systems. We use a protest system. So don't think that we went down there with like signs and stood out and yelled and marched. We did all our things, but there was the total, so you can see we got a lot of people. I don't deal in acre feet, so I put the gallons. But it's significant if you know what acre feet are. But there's your gallon equivalent. 298 billion gallons a year they put claim to. Can you imagine that? So we defeated every one of those claims through the protest process in our state. That was all done by the USDA. But I don't think anybody could stand to lose that much water anywhere. BioBlitz, I already described that. 700 in our area is actually 750 by the time they were done. But 700 is what they first started with. That's a seeking uplisting by overwhelming the agency. They can't do all their paperwork by 90 days, so therefore they failed their duty, so you get to sue them. So you flood them on purpose. Of course, most of the resources were water, and they, of course, went after cultural and historic uses, in our case, like cattle and mining and timber. Here's about our fire. They destroyed enough timber to have kept our largest mill that had 300 people open 24/7 for 21 years. They burned up, or was burned up. Now it's kind of funny, much the justification for the management decisions that created these conditions for a fire you couldn't stop, and it's the same as everywhere in the West. It's destroying the watersheds and the air quality. It was due to protect the spotted owl. The problem is they burned up 86% of the spotted owls in this fire because it was impossible to fight because of the conditions they created. And then we destroyed all the trout fishing, which were featured in magazines every year all around the country and world, and the scenery and all that, and then our ag users and the pumping stations at the res. The rat team, it's an appropriate name too, and that's their name. But it's from the USDA Forest Service. Rat teams come in, and they basically will work 24 hours a day. They'll bring specialists and beg, borrow, and steal within their agency, and they'll work around the clock for about 2 weeks and give you an assessment, or give the agency an assessment. A conservative $110 million in damage just to our forest. That did not include any of our impacts. So the bridges that were pushed completely downstream. It's when you have that much water come off a mountainside that's been burned, pushing concrete bridges down and completely wiping out hillsides and roads, none of that was ever worked in. This is just cost to the Forest Service was $110 million. Okay, and that didn't include firefighting cost. 80%, it was 86% was the total cumulative number. Destroying our tourism and watershed industries. We didn't have much choice but to fight back on this one. We forced roadside salvage sales, which was the first step, and that helped some of our small timber users that had to close down for lack of supply to get back in the game. Because finally they had a supply that was easy to access and they could turn into some money right now. So we did a system on each side of the road, because if we can get the roads back open for the hunting and tourism and fishing and cattle, we can get people back up on the mountain working, whatever industry they're in. I got the 10 million board feet right from our forest supervisor. Yeah, it's not a lot, but it's a lot when it's only in 2 districts out of the whole U.S. That's a tremendous amount. When they hardly talk in millions of board feet in some states nowadays. Yes, sir.
On that, do you mind drilling down just a little bit? How did Apache County get those agencies into that posture?
Sure, I'll show you that. A good question, because I was going to do like with the initials and stuff and just skip on through. We did 2 or 3 things. And I'll show you, here's the proof. Here is from Cronkite News. We're cited as a cure for the disease of growing wildfires. This is off the congressional hearings on the floor. Congressman Gosar, Tipton, of course, Bishop was the chair at that particular hearing. You're Bishop. So I only show some of these news articles is because 3 weeks ago in Northern California and Southern Oregon at some hearings, a supervisor actually, forest supervisor, stood up and told those counties to refute us that this right here that's signed and all that this didn't exist and never happened. It's amazing the length people will lie to. So I wanted to show you the news articles too that the hearings happened in case that ever came up. What we had to do was we declared an emergency, which the county has a right to do. We did one on federal lands, federally managed lands is really the key, and then our road networks, this one. And this one, the Sheriff's Department, the Search and Rescue, and the posse weighed in heavy on the authorship of this particular resolution here. And it didn't have a number. Well, that's got a number. I think that one was 12. I'd have to look it up. But basically, to your question, we'll go back to the land one. What we did was we cited the easily provable current history, recent history. Look, we've suffered through this, we've had these losses, we're still suffering this. This, and this action has caused these, and it's indisputable, so here's what we need to do. We're going to notice everybody, whether you be governors, that the governor and the Arizona Division of Emergency Management, blah, blah, blah. Tell everybody your problem. The day after these were signed by the Board of Supervisors on a Tuesday, Wednesday I'm at the state capitol, having meetings with the governor and her chief of staff and the Department of Ag, Fish and Game, briefing them. Here's why we did it. Here's what we did. Here's your free color copy. Okay? So, the next step, and in here we said the agencies better be over here ASAP. So, the next day, Wednesday, while I'm down there, the county manager's office and the board is sending letters to every agency that we've named in here, saying, here's the dates. We're open for these dates and times. You need to come sit with us and talk. Figure out how are we going to fix this problem. Don't leave it up to them to pick a date and time. Tell them what dates work good and get them in your building. And that included some state agencies like our Game and Fish, who hasn't always been the best working with us, and our state forestry. Okay, so there's when we got them at the table. When we said, what stops you when you have the right to do salvage sales after a catastrophic event? What is going to stop us from getting these board feet off the forest now? Because right now, Washington, D.C. has flown in here and said the ideal situation would be just to close the entire forest for 2 to 5 years. That's what the head of the bear team and the head of the rat team said right out of the forest chief's office, Tidwell's. And we said that's not going to happen. So either we're going to be arresting you or you're going to try to be arresting us, but that's not going to happen. So how do we work on this? Well, immediately upon being pushed, when we said, here's what we're passing, here's the list of dates, come meet with us. We'll even pick a mutually, spots. We picked the Eager Town Hall, a city building. And here's the forest. We said, all you guys bring maps. We're bringing all our stuff. Let's talk. We sat down. They said, well, actually, there's nothing stopping us. And we said, well, we already know that. It says in your manual you're allowed to do basically untold number of things without NEPA documents after a disaster. So start doing it. So what they did was our forest supervisors, which was one leaving and one kind of standing in for a while until he was officially it, they really leaned on forest throughout the region and got in extra timber marking teams and mapping specialists, and they literally drove all daylight hours 7 days a week. 7 days a week literally, to get as many cells as we could marked. And then they used all the exemptions they legally have at their disposal to get them out to the regular public bidding process. Because you can have sealed or open bids either way.
What would you have done? What could you have done if they'd have said, no, I'm sorry, we're in charge of this process, you are not in charge of this process, we're going to decide what happens here, not you. And then what do you do?
That was it with both these resolutions. Our sheriff and all of us, we went and briefed them and said, look, if you're not willing to sit down at the table immediately, if you start closing down gates and closing down the forest, you will be arrested and we're bulldozing the gates.
Okay.
Under the name of health, safety, and welfare.
Didn't your road resolution spell out that was a Class A misdemeanor, imprisonable?
Yeah, that's this other one here. Yeah, it laid it all, and it was all legal. The state AG's office said, well, you guys are still as wild up there as always, but yeah, everything's legal. So, but yeah, we just laid it out to them, and we just had to have a sit down with them and tell them, look, if you are, everything that's happening right now, look, we're pumping stations, we've got people with no running water, including hospitals. We've got road networks that are closed because of fire and now post-fire flooding. And we have $1 billion industry in the form of elk hunting and fishing and camping and all that. So we need to get this open now, and people need jobs. And what do we got sitting around? We have some shut down mills. So Nutrioso mill, one of the oldest in the state of Arizona, it even had its power loop removed to save that monthly charge. They got back on board, and we're running 2 shifts, 6 days a week, Sundays off, of course. We have a little tongue and groove mill. That's all they do is tongue and groove interior and exterior siding for homes out by our airport. Then the Reedhead Brothers mill by our dump transfer station, whether I call it a dump still. Then they got to fire back up, and I can take you out there. If we were down there, I could take you out there right now and show you the 30 guys out there sorting and stacking lumber. Then this high-speed mill unit that moved in from the state of Washington, one of the biggest national concerns are in the timber industry still. And they said the reason we're coming down here is because you've made it where we can go to work again. So a lot of what we do in this role, and maybe like what we're talking about today, is just running defense for our locals in the name of critters and agencies and water and whatever.
Just a comment. We've had this conversation with the Forest Service a number of times about what does it take, and they say, well, you don't have any industry to come in, and I said the reason we don't have any industry is because you guys don't have a continuing
Supply.
A continuing supply of wood, and who's going to come in and spend $1 million or $2 or 40 trying to set up a mill when there's the probability that you're not going to have an ongoing supply? And they said, well, we can't help you. That was the conversation basically that we had in Cedar here just a couple of months ago. We really can't solve that problem. I said, until you solve that problem, then the private sector will not risk capital to invest in a mill. So what you've basically done is solve that problem.
To a great extent, and it wasn't easy. We didn't just pass this resolution and all sing kumbaya. I mean, the Fed said, well, we're coming in, by the way, and we're gonna arrest you, Doyle, for writing this, and you, supervisor, for ramrodding it, and you, sheriff. And then they said, no, we're gonna arrest all of you, so don't bother coming here. Okay, so we went to regional in Albuquerque, and then Tidwell's office. I mean, it took both those trips too. And I mean, so like my little flight and hotel to DC and back was like $1,100-1,200. And that's a lot of money to me.
But when push came to shove, the Fed backed down.
Yes. They had them on health, safety, welfare. In fact, sitting at the table, drawing the maps and developing the process for one of these big timber sales in the Alpine District. I have the unfortunate situation of having the headquarters and many of the founding people of the Center for Biological Diversity. The founder lives where I live, Todd Schultze, the co-founder, and he's at every meeting. Okay. Now, if any of you are members, make sure when you relay what I'm bad-mouthing them about, relay it accurately if any of you are members, because usually what I say about him gets to them wrong. The Center for Biological Diversity headquarters there, the Nature Conservancy, Wild Earth Guardians, they all have offices because of Tucson. Tucson is like, I don't know, it's its own state. So even the co-founder, Todd Schultze, and President Emeritus, everything, at the table in front of everybody said we would be fools to take on health, safety, and welfare issue against a county. And this plan, if we all agree today on this map and how we drew it, my sheriff's there, tons of people are there, this plan will not be protested or litigated, I can promise you that. And by God, when it came out for public review, 30-day comment period, they didn't write a single letter because they don't want that in court. What's the center going to do if they actually try to take on health, safety, and welfare declaration the county's made? A 10th Amendment case. They're not ready for that, okay, to get that in court. So,
to be clear, it's not the county taking on the actual contract and doing the administration and the work on that.
We did one that nobody wanted to cut. It's a spotted owl core habitat.
So it's Forest Service?
No, private.
No, I mean, as far as the contract, the entity doing the contract?
Yeah.
Yeah. And was there any NEPA done on this thing, or was it all done by categorical exclusion?
Well, there are no categorical exclusions anymore, thanks to the center. But they do have what they can do in catastrophic conditions, which are like CEs. Then regular timber sales with regular marking, notice of 10 days, which is all the law requires, and then sealed and open bid, just like the old days. All we wanted to do was run scrimmage to make jobs and make our place safe again. The county doesn't want to get in the timber industry. Now the spotted owl pack, the core protected area, okay, now that's 100 acres around every nesting site in America. Typically you'll hear that, well, this owl and this owl shut down all the timber or all the grazing or whatever, right? Wrong. Read how many people have actually read the spotted owl management plan. It says in there the pack consists of 100 acres is all, and even the 100 acres, 20% per year you can cut. So that means you would be cutting the core spotted owl area, the only restricted zone, 100% over a 5-year window. None of our national forests get that treatment, from seamless treatment from one end to the other. Okay, so you can't. And we had the fish and wildlife directors in our county for free. They wouldn't even let me buy their lunch. Teach us how to do that when we went after that one. And we did that 86-acre cut because no private guy, they all said, now you've really gone loony, Mr. Apache County. You're going to get sued into non-existence cutting a protected area.
Did you have public hearings on your 2 resolutions?
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about that, what happened there.
Well, we just, first, the meeting prior, according to our rules, so 2 weeks prior on the agenda, we showed an intention that we were probably going to do these issues. So we wanted public input. Then we posted this resolution as you see it on the website and then at the post offices, our normal routine, the week before. So agenda reviews on Wednesday, the week previous to the Tuesday meeting, and everything's published that day by noon. So everybody could come in, and we knew it would be a brutal meeting, so we left plenty of time and didn't put much else on the agenda. We didn't try to worry about potholes and all that other stuff that day, because it's going to be a long meeting. And surprisingly, we had 2 eco-Nazis from New Triosa show up, which I expected these 2 ladies to show up because they show up to everything. And other than that, the meeting drug on forever when people support. We had ranchers that I don't see once a year show up to a meeting that have never been to a meeting. We had timber users, the people that use the water at the mines drove from 3 counties away to support us. That's what we got, and that's what took so damn long, even with the 3-minute limit. And so then it was passed unanimously. That includes 2/3 of my board is Navajo Nation. So a lot of people thought that was bizarre. Actually, everything I've shown you today has been passed unanimously. In fact, if anything, a lot of these actions have gotten rid of a lot of the, what I call north-south, and we all do. In our case, because it is north up here of our county, is Navajo Nation, and down here's whatever you want to call it, non-Navajo. And we've gotten rid of a lot of the traditional conflicts because we've come to realize that we had a common problem in a lot of areas, and it was these agencies. Because like the Navajos understood after a few maps and discussions that the water we're protecting flows downhill, and they're downhill from me. So they had a dog in the fight. The sheriff had it.
Yeah, I was wondering, where do you get the money to fight this, to do all this stuff that you're doing?
Well, actually, not one of these has been litigated.
So I mean, so the county just hired you and your firm to
Yeah.
do this stuff?
Yeah. And some of the operations are under general fund because they choose to do travel. If they send me out of state travel, to do that out of a different fund, not call it hourly, just straight, here's your plane ticket and here's what it costs, and we're going to keep, you have this much per year. The other stuff is based on an hourly basis, and then whenever we can cost share, we do. Like the willow flycatcher is a bird that gets used against livestock throughout the West often. So Catron County, Greenlee County, Donna Ana, Hidalgo, and us So 5 New Mexico and us teamed up. So when we touch the New Mexico border, and we're a long, narrow county, so we touch 3 New Mexico counties. But we're all the same. We don't pay attention to the state line. We teamed up, and that was like $1,000 project when it was done. But every county got the letter, and we divided it by 6 ways. So it didn't cost hardly anything.
Doyle, one of the things that I get when I mention the things that you've done down there is, well, yeah, they got all that done because they had that big fire. And I guess the question is, do we need a big fire? Because I really don't want the fire.
No, you don't. You want to avoid it.
So is any of this that you accomplished because of the after effects of the fire?
But some of it, yeah. And
or is it something you feel we can just move forward?
Well, you can move forward on a lot of it because protecting like the water, and then like this last 11,000 acre timber sale, it was called, it came under stewardship. And in December, just this past December, at like 10 at night, the local supervisor, the local supervisor of our forest, Jim, called me and emailed and said, Doyle, we got a big problem. The highway departments have shut down all the weight limits on the highways to 23,000, which is less than an empty truck. So they shut down the operation is what they did, playing with road weights. So I called everybody, which they're pretty open to if it's an emergency. We met the next morning at the county annex, branched out, we went down to the governor's office, we got the details. There was a Forest Service calling us for help because they know they need to get this cut and going. This is 2 weeks before Christmas. 300 men and women are relying on this work. Direct impacts at the mills, trucking, everything, let alone the families. And this comes down. So he wanted to see it keep going, but he can't do anything. As a forest supervisor, he can't go directly engage the Department of Transportation at federal or state, either one, and all these different entities. It's this one of these kind of funny clauses in the Forest Service, and we know that. So we ran scrimmage because it's our people and our jobs. And what it culminated in was once we educated a few of the Navajo senators and legislators and the governor's staff, she just did a governor's executive over and overwrote all the weight limit restrictions and raised them all right back up to 80 like normal America, like they had always been, so we could proceed forward. And that project just finished up, that 11,000 acres.
See, the problem that we're facing here, is we've got this aspen regeneration that they're trying to push onto the ranchers and the sage grouse that's coming up. That if they get that on, it's gonna totally do away with our grazing.
Correct. I know. The sage grouse is the new spotted owl. Plain and simple.
So, I mean, that's something that we're looking at in our county, along with the timber industry that, I mean, Kaibab used to hire, I don't know, they had probably up to towards 1,000 jobs between here and Fredonia. And we have no sawmills. We have one little sawmill.
Yeah, we had to reinvigorate an industry. It's hard. And when we started trying to get truckers, it was amazing. The Simpsons, one of the last big log trucking firms, Danny Simpson, he forgot how bad his equipment, the shape it got into when he was only running 2 or 3 trucks, and now he needed dozens again. And the mills and our bridges and road networks, but it didn't matter because we've made a lot of jobs about. And in fact, for economic ingenuity, I don't get any of these awards. Everything I do is always in the name of the elected official. So like when I did all these security briefings recently about disease spread and Al-Qaeda, it's Bishop and all them, they get the credit. I'm just the guy in the back giving them what to say. Okay? But let me show you this one down this way. Oh, here's one of your esteemed legislators. I made him work. He came to visit, was at my house, Ivory, and we found a wildcat fire. Ironically, when I was giving him a survey of our fire, we actually found one someone left. And that wasn't a staged photo. I said, "Get that damn shovel out of my truck and start running it." And he was all pretty and clean. Look at him. They work for us, remember? Here's the county summit. Well, they're supposed to in a republic. For the county stewardship program, I know you can't really see that, but sorry about that. Right here, county and economic development for the implementation of innovative solutions to community challenges through the county stewardship program. And this went through a national peer-reviewed panel when we got this from the Association of Counties last year. Because they had to prove it out. There was an economist, a lawyer, etc., to prove out our claims. Now, we didn't even make the claim. Someone put us in for this award. I actually don't know to this day if it was a forester or what. But they award the plaques. It's hanging in somebody's office. I don't know who. There's a picture. And the county manager sent me that picture when I was out in California. Actually, I'm right before Ogden, because I wanted to show Mark or someone. So, you can do it, and the revenues pay for themselves, because there's.
How do you get started?
I'm telling you, the sage grouse is the nail in the coffin in the West. And myself, and I'm telling you, I'm not saying this to get a job. Me and my friends talk all the time. We have to, or we can't stay ahead of things and try to win all the time. And we don't win all the time. We just win a lot. The sage grouse is the biggest threat to the West with the wolf. Those two species are the two most illegitimate species we've seen in U.S. Fish and Wildlife history. Neither one of them are bona fide subspecies. Both of them have no science or economic data backing them. They're ripe for litigation at the ESA level, and it's only going to happen as if a bunch of counties team up and sue. Mm-hmm.
So, I'm just wrapping my head around your process. It sounds to me like in your toolkit, you've got you're watching for the federal plans to come out. You're doing substantive comments.
Yeah.
And you're having significant success there.
Yeah.
The health, safety, welfare resolutions are kind of another tool.
Correct,
that
sir.
you use to get people at the table and to make things start happening
To make
when
it
you're
happen.
being ignored.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, because if they don't want to listen to my nice letter, like we were pleased to comment today and all that, then you bring out the 2x4, the resolutions or the ordinances, like we recently did, where the wolves are a direct threat because of disease. We've got them tracking kids at schools when their parents are letting them off. Our neighboring county, and I can show you the pictures, has to have the kids wait in cages at the bus stops because of the wolves stalking them. I can show you the pictures. It's that bad with these wolves. So we passed a full-blown ordinance and briefed everybody to the top on it, face to face. The wolves are a threat to us, and we're going to start killing them. And of course, they all say, hey, it's a threatened species. Well, so is the human, and so are jobs.
And so are you.
Darren had.
Isn't it jurisdiction is another big piece of what
Mm-hmm.
we usually talk about?
Yeah.
We haven't touched much on yet.
No, I was going to do that right after this break, because I have those charts next.
Okay.
And I wanted to show you those, like by county. So I would say pick an issue, and if I was you all, God, my Okie's coming out in me. I would pick on the sage grouse wolves, because the wolves are hitting southern Utah. Fish and Wildlife can tell you what they want. They've already been verified. They're on all of our northern boundaries of our Navajo Nation, which I'm your neighbor. They've already been killed, DNA proofed out in Kansas and West Texas, and they've already been mapped and charted coming in to every state around Colorado. So I don't care if you're not part of the wolf program, you're part of it, whether you want to be or not. So, but that's a really good species that's weak, and I think a bunch of counties pulling their assets together to constantly run that scrimmage, that toolkit, that's a great word, and then use the 2x4 when you have to. But on a bigger picture, this sage grouse needs to be attacked across the West, and don't wait for the legislators. I'm telling you, don't wait for him. Mr. Bishop's a nice guy and all, but don't wait for him. He's too busy bargaining away your land right now. Tipton's a nice guy in Colorado, but he went in, it's worth $700,000. He's $11.8 million now, and he's only a one-termer. So the counties are the key. Let's take a break, and then I want to get into that jurisdiction and these. Oh, sir, sorry.
You follow up on Darren's question. you mentioned that it doesn't take, well, as you're talking about getting your forest industry, it sounded like because of the catastrophic fire, the Forest Service had some sanity back into their policies. But if you haven't had the fire,
We had
do they have those options?
we had done the road one before any fires. That was written in 2006, and our fire was 11, and 400 species, things like that. Writing plans for management, or this national stewardship, which is congressionally authorized stewardship. It's not a program of the Forest Service. It's an actual congressional act. That's 10 years old now.
But we have a fire just waiting to happen.
Yeah, you do, and that's what you use, and that's why in our resolution's imminent threat.
Okay.
We can prove the fuel
So that's
load.
what we say.
That's what you say. Your fuel load here should be like 7 tons per acre, and much of your fuel load out here is over 70. Tenfold.
This might sound like a dumb question, but why not use the 2x4s and not be nice, because they're not being nice with us? Why not use the 2x4 first?
Well, we typically actually do. I was trying to put on a nice face today. But the letters, though, if the plan comes out like this morning, there was some things from the EPA for my neighboring county. I tipped them off to it because I know they're not reading it. And this power plant employs 1,400 people, and it's like their biggest employer next door to us. There's not a 2x4 to use yet. They're just because they've only made an announcement. But you can write a letter. Yeah, you're right. You've got the 2x4, health, safety, and welfare. Everybody sitting in here has it.